Hi everyone, my name is Roya Ghahremani. I'm a psychology master's student here at Trent, and my supervisor is Katerina Kiefer. So today I'm going to be talking to you about my thesis project, and this presentation is called Unbridled Potential Equine-Assisted Learning for Resilience Building. So let's get into it and find out what all of this means. So first off, before we get into all of the resilience talk, we want to understand what is trauma. Well, trauma is a deeply distressing experience or several of these experiences that are either lived or viewed. So one person doesn't actually have to experience the trauma themselves, but maybe they've seen it somewhere, seen it done to somebody they know. So trauma has these shared qualities. It's unpredictable, it's sudden, and it's out of somebody's control. And it's important to remember that it's not the experience itself that can be labeled as traumatic, but the reaction to the event. So now the flip side of this, what is resilience? Well, a lot of people think that resilience is kind of this have or have not thing that either you're born with or you're born without, when in reality, resilience is the ability to overcome and grow through adversity. Now, this is something that we can foster in the right environment and something that we can build in people. It's important to note that resilience is not the absence of pathology or stress or illness, but the ability to operate despite that hardship. A lot of resilience researchers like to call resilience ordinary magic because it's something that all ordinary people possess, but there's a little bit of something about it that we can't quite put our thumb on. Now, resilience can be built in this whole environment of resourceful communities and nurturing relationships. Inside of this, there are three aspects of resilience that we're going to focus on, and this is the Prince-Embury model of resilience. These things are a sense of mastery, sense of relatedness, and emotion regulation. So, what are these things? Well, let's find out. The first one, sense of mastery, is somebody's confidence in their ability to control their life and have influence over the things that happen in their life. So, some of these things can include confidence, self-efficacy, optimism, adaptability, and goal setting. The next thing is sense of relatedness. So this isn't the amount of relationships that somebody has per se, but their view of the quality of these relationships and how supportive these relationships are. So this domain encompasses trust, comfort in social situations, tolerance of differences, and support systems in place. And the last aspect is emotion regulation. So emotion regulation is being able to exert a certain level of control over your emotions and use them in the proper context at the right time. So aspects of emotion regulation include mindfulness and cognizance of one's emotions, again, using emotions in the correct contexts, and fast recovery from strong emotional reactions. So now the question that might be riding on everyone's minds right now, get it riding, is what is equine-assisted learning? So ironically, this is working with horses on the ground, so there's no actual riding involved. But what people do here is ground-based experiential learning. So they'll do things with the horses, such as watching the herd, grooming the horse, leading the horse, those kinds of things, to learn transferable life skills, such as confidence, communication, self-care, and emotional awareness. Previous research on equine-assisted learning has worked with a variety of participants, ranging from minority populations to at-risk, traumatized, and even typical populations. And a lot of this research has happened in youth, which is what we're focusing on today. Some of the improved outcomes from past research include that confidence, sense of social support, optimism, control of emotions, and where the verdict is still a little fuzzy is on mental illnesses like depression and severe behavioral problems. And the reason behind this is most likely because equine-assisted learning is an intervention. It's not a therapy, so it's not actually a mental health intervention. So folks with extreme behavioral issues or mental illnesses may want to seek complementary therapy as well. The purpose of this study, so the reason why we are doing this, basically we want to investigate whether resilience changes after an 8-week equine-assisted learning intervention in trauma survivors. To link changes to the actual program, we are also taking process variables, which I'll talk about in just a couple minutes. And finally, to carve a deeper understanding of the numbers that we're getting from the data, we also have qualitative questions that we ask the participants. to kind of get to the nitty-gritty of what's going on behind those numbers. So our participants were 83 female-identified youth. They all self-identified as interpersonal trauma survivors, and they're all from the Peterborough and surrounding area. This experiment ran 12 groups of about 6 to 8 participants at a time. And again, they were in this intervention for 8 weeks. So this is what our program design looks like. Basically, participants met at a pre-test point where they filled out the surveys below. Then they had 8 weeks of equine-assisted learning. Every session, every week, every session focused on a different kind of transferable skill. After 8 weeks, they had a post-test session where they filled out the surveys, and then we also did 1 month and 6 month follow-ups where they filled out the same surveys. So you'll notice that we also took some mental health symptom checklists. For this presentation, we're just focusing on the resiliency and the emotional socio-competencies. And here are those process variables I was talking about. So this is kind of how participants were rating the program. So at the end of each session, they had to rate how satisfied they were with the session, how helpful they found it, how comfortable they were with the group, and how empowered they felt with what they learned. Aside from this 1 to 5 scale rating, because it's still quantitative there, we had qualitative questions, which means that they're open-ended. Participants can answer with their words however they wanted to. So they had to answer what they learned in the session, what did the session evoke, what did they learn, what tools they wanted to keep from that session, and what they would like to remember about the session. So now I'm going to show you some results from the quantitative as well as the qualitative side. So our first, intrapersonal skills, which is a social emotional competency of how well somebody recognizes their own emotions. As you can see, there's a clear increase here, and we also found with those process variables that participants who rated sessions more helpful and rated more learning from the sessions experienced greater increases in interpersonal skills. Now, what I have here as well are some quotes from people that reflect interpersonal skills from that qualitative feedback. Horses are always there for you, and they like to help and understand what you're feeling. I felt that the horses touched my heart and that they sensed some type of emotion. So this is kind of giving us a little bit of feedback into kind of why that interpersonal skill might be changing during the program. Next up is interpersonal skills. So these are the skills of identifying emotions in others. As we can see, on a group level, not a whole lot of change. However, when we look at those process variables and correlate them, we can see that those with higher ratings of satisfaction, helpfulness, and learning were experiencing greater gains. Again, some quotes to show what we mean by that. I will focus more on people's body language as well as my own. Being kind to horses. Some have had traumatic life situations. Stress management. So this one was an interesting one because it actually looks like it went down. But as you can see here, there's no correlation with the process variables. So it's iffy to say that this result is because of the program. I have 2 different kinds of quotes here. The first one, I don't know anything else that helps me besides smoking, cigarettes, and weed, may indicate to us that the program was showing some people that their stress management skills currently are not great. Take deep breaths and use horses as a good coping strategy. So this is an example of a quote that shows that this might have increased stress management for individuals, even if not at a group level. Adaptability. Again, not a whole lot of change here that's consistent. However, once more, higher ratings of satisfaction and learning predicted greater gains at follow-ups for those participants. Adaptability. I would like to remember to be flexible and trust and reassure others. Even though times are rough, everything will be okay. So those kind of demonstrate how participants might be using the skills of adaptability, might be learning about them in their lives. Here is sense of mastery. So at a group level, not a whole lot of change, but when we break it down with those process variables, we can see that higher session satisfaction, helpfulness, and learning predicted a greater gain at the follow-ups. So even though it's not working again for the group level, there are some of those people when we break it down that are experiencing increases. I felt happy after accomplishing leading the horse Maggie because she was a bit hard to lead. If I meet a horse again, I will lead it like I did today. So those are examples kind of the leadership and the confidence that the program might be fostering in participants. sense of relatedness. So we have a little bit of an increase here, but because it wasn't correlated with any process variables, we're hesitant to say that it was because of the program. However, here's a couple quotes to show you that, so there are aspects of the program that might be helping certain people with this. The horse, Blue, and me connected really well, so I think she would be great for other kids. Everyone is going through hard times, and there are people who understand what I'm going through. So demonstrating a little bit of relatedness between the horse and the person and the people who are participating. And finally, emotional reactivity. So no significant change at a group level, but higher sessions of satisfaction predicted a greater reduction in emotion reactivity, which is the flip side of emotion regulation. Emotional reactivity is the proper term that's used in Prince Embury's resiliency model. So again, it's kind of just the flip side of emotional regulation. I breathed and calmed myself down while walking with the horses, demonstrating something that maybe participants were learning during the sessions to calm themselves down and take control of their emotions. I learned that in order for me to feel more in the present, I need to let go and just be there, fostering that kind of emotional awareness. So what's the take-home message here? What can we kind of conclude from all this research? We can conclude that equine-assisted learning is showing promise in increasing these socio-emotional competencies and resilience factors, but it really depends on the person. The impact depends on the program process variables. So again, like any intervention, we can't expect this to work for every single person. There's no way that one intervention is going to work for everybody, but if it's working for some people, it's definitely worth considering. Participants who derived more value showed greater improvements. So those who were invested, those who are rating it higher, enjoyed it a lot more. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Because again, not everything is going to work for everyone. But when we look at those process variables, when we look at that quantitative data and those qualitative pieces of feedback and tie them together, we can see that equine-assisted learning is having an impact on participants, be it a large group or a small group. Thank you so much for tuning in today to my talk. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email at roya.ghahremani@trentu.ca. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy.